Quick reminder, here's the query we started out in the SQL Sandbox for the game logs database from RetroSheet. So after the query, we're going to go to RStudio, and when we start RStudio, we always try to make sure our environment is empty by hitting the sweep button there, and double check our working directory by going to the file system and making sure we're in our working directory. Mine is off my desktop and it's called Sandbox and R data files. And here's the file we created with the query. Now I'm going to set working directory just to make sure it's been set over here, and I'm going to clear my console with the Control L command. Now we have this file, and it's titled RetroSheet Game Logs Intro for 2T Saber 101X. And let's run these packages. I typically have ggplot2 installed, so I can come over to the Packages tab and check. It's already installed, but this code is here in case you need to do it yourself. Get ggplot2 installed and get it checked off here, loaded up into your library. Now the next command is to read that RetroSheet game log data into RStudio. We use this command here. Let's run that. We come to our working directory, find it, make sure we have our working directory here, and choose the file we want to open. It's named RetroSheet 00-09.csv. And it's running along. It worked. We finally have our data frame called attendance data, and it's got the right number of observations that we looked at in the previous tech tracks. 24,291 and 161 variables. So that looked good. That worked fine. Now we're going to do a summary of the attendance data. Let's run this command. And expand our console, scroll up, and look at some of the interesting data in the game logs database. Let's go take a few minutes and go through some of the data here. First, there were 4 dates in that decade that we're looking at where they had 18 games played. May 1st, September 29th, September 13th, in 2 separate years. 18 games is 3 over what would be typically seen in a full schedule because there's 30 teams. So these days must have had 3 doubleheaders played on the same day. Beyond that, this is an interesting set of data here, looking at the day of the week. And it turns out Monday is the low day. They had the lowest number of games on Mondays in that decade, and the highest was Saturday. So there's data here showing that Saturday was number 1 and Monday was number 7, the last day of the week. The highest score by a visiting team was 30 runs. The average score by the visiting team was 4.683. Now remember, this is over 24,000 observations. The highest run scored by the home team was 25, but the average run scoring by the home team was 4.834. That is a pretty significant difference. These are not the same. 4.834 in over 24,000 observations is greater than 4.683. And this is getting at what we talked about earlier, which is the home field advantage. There's some home field advantage here, and it's described in the winning percentage by the home team, and it's also described by the runs scored by the home team. Over here, the number of outs, this sort of makes sense. Both the median and the third quartile are the same. 54 is the right number of outs for a full 9-inning game, where the home team has to bat in the bottom of the 9th. A lot of games have 51 outs, where the home team is winning and they don't bat in the bottom of the 9th, and there's only 51 outs recorded in a game. that's why the average, the mean, is lower than the median. The median is 54. That's a full game. But obviously, baseball can be played beyond the ninth inning, and you had some games in that decade record 132 outs. That's a lot of outs. If there's 6 outs per inning by both half innings being played, this is a long game. Going down further, we can look at the number of games played in all the different parks. 813 is 3 games over what you'd expect in that decade. You'd expect 810 games played in every home park, but Seattle had 2 extras, and I'm not sure if that's the White Sox or the Cubs, this ballpark, but that had the most games played in that decade. There are 3 extra games played in that ballpark. Attendance is interesting. The mean attendance for the decade was 30,319. The max attendance was 61,707. These are data that we're going to look at further in our script here to try to better understand some relationships in the game logs database. Minutes played, the median was 172. The average was 174.5. That's slightly less than 3 hours was the average for the decade. All different data here from the visiting team: at-bats, hits, doubles, triples, home runs, RBI. Interesting that there were 6 intentional walks in a game. In this decade, it probably had to do with Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds was intentionally walked at record levels in this decade. And we can look at errors and assists and putouts. Putouts here are the number of outs. 66 putouts means 22 half innings. We have the same list of data for the home team: at-bats, hits, doubles, triples, sacrifice flies, RBI, intentional walks. Your observations on these data might generate questions you have about this data set that you might use both the SQL Sandbox and RStudio to answer. We can look further down here. Andy Pettitte was the winningest pitcher of the decade. You can tell by winning pitcher. He had 148 wins from 2000 to 2009. The losingest pitcher was Livan Hernandez with 124 losses that decade. The most saves was Mariano Rivera with 397 in that decade. Now that's averaging 39.7 saves every season. Albert Pujols had the most game-winning RBI. And the most starts, interestingly, were by Livan Hernandez. He had the same number of starts as a visiting pitcher and as a starting pitcher at home. The home starting pitcher number was 166, and the visitor starting pitcher number was 166 also. So, interesting bit of trivia for that decade. The batter who had the most visitor leadoff batting order position was Ichiro Suzuki. He led off more games as a visiting player than anyone else by a wide margin. And we can talk about the cleanup hitter as a visitor was Manny Ramirez. He had the most starts as a cleanup hitter as a visitor. Scroll down to the home data. The home data, Ichiro was also first in the home data as the leadoff hitter, and the cleanup hitter home data was again Manny Ramirez. He had the most starts as a home player, batting fourth in the lineup. So there's interesting data here that we can just sort of scan as we look through the RetroSheet game logs summary in RStudio using the summary command.